Hello, I'm Lenny Stein, and on behalf of the invisible organisms, we say welcome to sauerkraut making. We're going to take the humble cabbage, give it to the invisible organisms. They do all the work. They really are the star of the day. They are the star of sauerkraut making. They're the star of any lacto fermentation. Sauerkraut belongs to the lacto fermentation family. To lacto ferment means nothing at all to do with dairy. It's all to do with all those lactobarbars, all the bacteria that it produces. And if done to the correct way, you'll get many strains, not just one. It's a community, it's a colony of bacteria, all gut-loving. So when we make a ferment, we ferment for two reasons. One for health and one for taste. So we're going to use the dry salting method of making sauerkraut, exactly the way that my grandma Matilda Augusta Stein did. And it's a great way because it produces all that good bacteria. So when we say dry salting, what we do, we cut. First of all, we get our little knife and our chopping board. We don't need a lot of equipment for sauerkraut making. Just a knife, a chopping board, and an oxygen-free bottle. Oxygen-free being air-free. So the size of your cabbage does really matter. You know, size, that sometimes in some parts in the world they say size doesn't matter, but with sauerkraut making it does. If you cut it too thick, what will happen is you make the job too hard for those fermenting fairies. And when it ferments, they'll sort of ferment the finer bits and the thicker bits won't be fermented properly. So just keep that in mind. You could use a mandolin. I like to use my hands. I find it a very meditative process making sauerkraut. And I think the more that I can get involved with my own body, the better it is. So if you make it too fine, like if you are using a mandolin, don't use it on this part that will make it really, really fine because it'll ferment way too fast and you'll end up with a very, very sour, not so tasty. Because remember, we ferment for health and for taste, so we want it to be very tongue tasty. So when we chop, we add to the bowl with each good handful, like say, we've cut your cabbage into quarters, so say like a half of a quarter. Once you put that in, use your salt. And your salt is only very fine. This is where a lot of people go wrong. They use way too much salt. If you do this method, you'll make sure that you've got even distribution. So the salt just goes on and it's just very, very fine. So it's just covered over there. There's no need to weigh your salt or this percentage because two salts don't weigh the same. So it's not necessary. So this is the very easiest way and it's the best way. It's the best process. So there we have it. So this is the really meditative part. We hug and we massage. So there's a real technique. So it's just like if you made a kale salad. You know, you made a kale salad and you put your olive oil in and you massage the kale. Exactly the same. So it's just picking it up, hugging and massaging. Hugging and massaging. We do that till it goes right through. With the full cabbage, it'll take you about 10 minutes to hug and massage your cabbage. So if you're working along with me, start massaging. So we're hugging and massaging, and that will produce its own brine. With this dry salting method, you never ever pour water or anything it will create its own brine because salt sucks. So the job of the salt, it actually has a couple of roles. One that it'll suck out the moisture at this stage. Another, it'll keep your veggie crunchy. So, because that's the idea, we want it a bit like the Italian pasta, we want it to be al dente, we don't want it too soft, because too soft's not tongue tasty. So that's the way we go with the salt, and the salt also has another role. It actually stops any bad bacteria from forming. You know how salt's very good to clean wounds and all that, so it will stop any bad bacteria before the good bacteria takes hold. Because obviously when we put this into the jar, there's no good bacteria in there as yet. So except for the bacteria that's on your actual cabbage skin, your outside of your cabbage leaves, that's why it's important to use a fresh harvest or an organic cabbage. And there is where those mighty invisible organisms, that's the very first start of your fermentation, is in the soil. So if you can get it from the best source and the freshest possible, you'll have a great start. So there we have it. Now, you can add additions. any additions, but just be mindful of the more additions that you add to your cabbage, the softer the end result. So like you could add turmeric. One of my favourites is turmeric and fresh fennel. Turmeric with fermentation, it actually makes it bioavailable, and it makes it water soluble. So when you ferment your turmeric, the fermentation process will make that water soluble, so it's very, very good for your body to absorb. It's easier for it to absorb, and it's, you know, turmeric has all those anti-inflammatory properties and many anti-properties, but especially the anti-inflammatory. So now we're going to put it into a jar. So what we have to do is we've got to compress it. There's got to be absolutely no air pockets. If you can just remember to smother the cabbage. Smother it with love. When you're making it, smother it with the love of that hugging and massaging. And now we're going to smother it with its own brine. Because when it's all covered in brine, all will be fine. So that's what you just remember, is just smother it. Now you will see you've got a really big, like you've got a full cabbage there, and it's one of those size cabbage there, and that's going to fit into that litre jar, and you'll say, no way. Well, yes, because you're going to press it in. Now, if your cabbage was a little bit limp, you know, you weren't getting a lot of luck of getting all that moisture out like this, like if you just didn't get a lot of moisture and you think, oh, I'll have to add water. Please don't do that. Add something that's a little bit moist. Like you could add some pineapple, but don't add a real ripe pineapple. Add one that's sort of more onto the green side, because we don't want to give the microbes, they'll be thinking they're making wine. We don't want them to over ferment it. So that pineapple there is like about 70% ripe. So that's gone in there, and some capsicum's really good. So here we'll put a little bit of yellow and red capsicum, and we'll mix that through. Now that will draw out the moisture. So that'll make a nice little mix, and that's really good. Like I said, if you find that if you've had a cabbage and you've bought it and it's been in storage, it might not produce as much liquid as what this one is, because this one's come straight out of the garden. So if you're going to start adding things like cauliflower, like this is a beautiful mix, and it's not really a sauerkraut, it's more of a vegetable, but this has got like a cauliflower in there, and that's beautiful. And I put a little bit of spice, like a little bit of curry spice, but you'd work on about 70% cabbage in there, and that's a different sort of ferment, but it's still good. So this process can be done with any vegetable. There is a vegetable called sour ribbon, which is done with turnips, and it'll ferment a lot quicker because you actually grate it. So again, it's easier for it to ferment, and it's beautiful. And you can use it exactly the same way. So you just shred your turnip and salt it exactly the same way. So you can see that I'm pressing that down. I'll lift it up for you in a minute. And we leave a little bit of space at the top, because what that fermentation process does is it produces carbon dioxide. In other words, bubbles. And you've got to leave room for those bubbles. So you will need a little bit of room for expansion, not too much, just a little bit at the top. So you can see there it's all covered in its own brine. That's got your little pineapple and your capsicum in there. I'm just doing that to show you if it wasn't, because otherwise you'd say, oh, I'm tempted to add water. We don't want you adding water, because what happens then, you're actually making like a sauerkraut tonic, and all the good bacteria will be in the liquid and not in so much in the cabbage. It'll be like a kvass. And with a kvass, as you know, you strain off the cabbage, and if you've got beetroot or whatever that you have in there, because the goodness is in that tonic. So, and that's very good for you, but we're not making kvass, which means sour beverage. We're making sauerkraut. So we've already put in there a little bit of dill. Now, the classic sauerkraut, the traditional sauerkraut, was made with caraway, so caraway seeds, and that's a really, really good, but some people don't like that earthy taste, although you find with fermentation that the earthy taste goes, and then I'm going to show you how to mix it in, because that's the most important part, is mixing in and serving it. It's all right just doing this making process, but once the mighty microbes have done their job, we have to dish it up to our family and our loved ones. So what you could use instead of caraway, you could use fennel. that comes from the same family, and it's lovely. My grandma always said that the caraway went in there to keep the kakerlake away, which is like to keep the bugs away. But that was the idea of it. And some of the herbs are really good, like parsley's very good, and lemon balm has a tannin in there, so that's very good if you want some extra crunch. So all the herbs have their little ways about them. Now you'll see that I put the outside cabbage leaf. That's what we're going to use for a weight to keep it down. Some people will cut like little circles, put them on there, but I like to just stuff it in there, stuff the veggies in there with love, and it's just beautiful. You can get little glass dunker weights, and that will keep it submerged as well. But we've packed that in there really nice and tight. We don't eat those outside cabbage leaves, they get discarded, you can compost those. But there we've made sauerkraut. Can you see that? Look how beautiful that is. Now see the colour of it. See, it's green and white, because that's come from the green cabbage. So when is it ready? And this is a good thing, because there's really no time frame, because it depends on your acidity, your taste of your tongue, and it also depends on your temperature. All fermentation depends on time and temperature. So with the time frame, we would pop this onto a little saucer, something that's a little bit deep, not metal, because metal can corrode because of the acidity that it produces, although it's alkaline forming on your body. So it's very pH balancing. But yes, it does cause that acidity when you've got the salt and everything in there to start with. So it can work up its way and bubble up. If you use a very good quality container, you've got no worries of it ever exploding, because they won't, because that's what they're designed for. They're designed to allow that carbon dioxide to come up and to just bubble over. So put it on a little deep saucer or something, just so in case you do get overflow, discard that overflow. You don't open up. There's no burping of these babies. Absolutely no burping, because we don't want to interfere with the mighty invisible organisms doing their work. Because our work, we've already done it. That's ours. We're finished. We've set it up. So now it's all over to them. They'll do the job for you, and they have to go through 3 phases. And the first phase, that it has to be pretty cool, in a nice little cool spot. When I do it in my crocks, like if I do it in my big crock, like this is a 5-litre crock, and it's heavy because I've just put my cabbage in there today. We've had a workshop here, actually a local workshop, and that's got 2 big drumhead cabbages. So if you've got a 10-litre crock, that will take 4 big drumhead cabbages. So with that will be carried in, and I'm going to actually put it into my bedroom for the first 3 to 5 days, and I'll keep it at a nice cool temperature, and then I'll move it into my little closet that I have specially made for my ferments, which was once just a linen closet. It's very good to keep them all out of the kitchen, because your kitchen has rising temperatures with ovens and all that sort of thing going. So if you can find a little closet like mine's round the corner, I mean, if you can't, it's no problems. My grandma fermented lots of things and made cheeses and butters and everything else in a very, very small kitchen. So it's not a problem. So that's our sauerkraut. Do cover it with a dark cotton tea towel, because what we're trying to do is to make it like the same environment in that dark crock, because that's how our ancestors did it. And the idea of that is to keep out the light, keep out UV light, keep out sunlight, and that will produce a lot more vitamins. And that's what we're after, health, and also make it more tasty. And that's it too. So when it's fermented, you check the colours. You check the colours of it. Like this one is your traditional sauerkraut. So you'll see that it's gone from that to that. I hope you can see that. So it's a real beigey colour. So the green's all gone and the beige has come. They talk to you. They'll stop bubbling. There won't be any fizzing and that happening in there anymore. So all the bubbles will have subsided. That's just the most amazing food. You will never feel alone again when you start to make these. And when I talked about making that with the salt and massaging it, the dry salt method, if you think, well, my hands aren't good or I don't have that time, you can do it very quickly. You can just shred it like I did, salt it, layer it, one layer, put another layer, put something heavy on top, like just press a little bowl on top, something that's got a little bit of weight in it. Go off, do your shopping, or go to bed at night and wake up and it will have drawn out the moisture. I just love that massaging, but not everyone's going to love that massaging. So there is another way you can still do the dry salting method. So this is a traditional sauerkraut. So this one has got the fennel seed in there instead of the caraway, as we just discussed. Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a sauerkraut salad. And this is what I do every weekend. I do a planning day and I go through and I see what I've got to top up with my ferments. I see what food that I'm going to prepare. You only need 2 to 3, no more than 5 tablespoons of fermented vegetables a day. So it's not a lot that you have to consume. And the best way to consume it is to mix it in with the fresh. When you mix it in with the fresh, like we're about to do, that will keep refrigerated for anywhere between 1 to 2 weeks. I find I just top them up each day. I keep adding another addition to it, and it keeps changing. It's like a perpetual salad. So we're starting off with just the traditional sauerkraut. And once again, you don't have to add a lot of things to your sauerkraut. The more simple you keep it, the better it is, because you're going to add your additions in now. Like if you were to add onion, and especially garlic, it can be very overpowering. So it's better to add like the garlic, because like fermented garlic by itself, now that is just superb. So I've smashed up one of those, and it's going to go in with the fresh salad. And that's the way you want to eat your garlic. You want to just ferment it by itself in a salted brine. That's the way, because if you add it to your sauerkraut, it won't ferment at the same time as the cabbage, and you can get an off-balance sauerkraut, and we don't want to do that. Same with onions. I mean, I know leeks and shallots aren't as strong as some onions, but you can still get them strong, and they can still be overpowering. So you're better off with something like your shallots, even though they're a milder onion. You can certainly ferment them by themselves. That's beautiful, like a bunch of shallots done whole, and tie them up with like a nice little garlic chive, like a little garlic ant tops. This is off my garlic growing. You do those, and you do those in brine all by themselves. And again, you would then add that to your salads and to your food preparation. But best to leave it out of your sauerkraut, because we want it al dente, we want it crispy and crunchy, we don't want it soft, and we don't want flavours to overpower. I know in kimchi, it's a totally different process, and that has like your blitz garlic, and it has your shallot, and it's a softer cabbage. It's a totally different process, because this is a tough cabbage. That's why it takes longer to ferment. So into there, we'll add some capsicum. This is fresh capsicum. We'll add some apple. You could grate that apple. I've done it in little chunks, but grated would be probably better. Some celery. Some shredded carrot. Some shallots, some parsley, and some mashed fermented garlic is all together in there. So we'll mix that up. Stir with my dill. My garden dill's gone a bit limp. It's been sitting out here. And then what we'll do is we'll add a dressing. So all we need to do, because it's already produced its own dressing. So like with sauerkraut, that brine, it's almost like a vinegar, because that's what it actually does. It pickles it, if you like, its own pickling. We don't add like vinegars and things to make our own pickle. It does its own pickling. That's one of the magic of the fermenting berries. So what we'll add is some nice oil, some lovely oil. So we'll add that as a dressing. That's a beautiful oil, that one. It's got gold leaf in it. Can you see that? Look at all those little gold. It's got gold leaf and truffles, because this deserves gold. So there we've got our sauerkraut salad. So that from that you can serve that with every meal, because you know we should be having vegetables with every meal. So this is beautiful, and you can have that like with your breakfast eggs. You have a nice little scoop of that. You can have it with your lunch. You can have it in a Buddha bowl. You can have a little bit of it in a Buddha bowl. That's really lovely. You can have it as your afternoon snack. You can have it on top of a cracker, you know, with a little bit of nut cheese or whatever that you want. You can have it again at dinner time. You can have a scoop of it at dinner. You can change the flavours of it. You can keep adding other, you can add some pineapple, you can add some Fuji fruit, persimmon. You can add anything as you go along. As you draw from it, add something else so it lasts you out the week. You can change the dressing. You don't have to keep adding oil. You could add a little bit of orange juice for a dressing. You could add a little dash of honey if you wished. So that is your perpetual salad, as I call it. So that's what you get to know, because that's how you're going to eat it. It's already all mixed in. So that's where you put your shallots and your onions and your salad onions and your garlic. So that's it. Now, we can ferment any cabbage into sauerkraut. We can do our green cabbage. We can do our red cabbage. Red cabbage, the traditional red cabbage, like the green one that you use, the caraway or the fennel seed. This one, juniper berries, is beautiful. So your juniper berry and just red cabbage, that's all you need. And you can combine it. So you can combine, like say if you used half a green cabbage and a quarter of a red cabbage, you can put a little bit of juniper berry if you like. But what's really lovely with that is a little bit of fruit. But don't overpower it with fruit, because as we said, we don't want it too sweet. So you could put 1 apple. So 1 apple to that half a green, quarter of a red, 1 apple, a little bit of ginger and a little bit of turmeric. Not with your juniper berries with that. I think the juniper berries are better just by themselves with the red cabbage. But so that then becomes apple kraut. That will ferment in probably about 2 weeks, where your plain traditional krauts will be anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks, depending on your temperature. You could put something like a papple in there. That's an Australian fruit. It's a cross between a pear and an apple, but pears are very nice, an ashy pear. Something that's not extra soft, like a nice hard pear. You could use a persimmon. They're beautiful, absolutely lovely in there. So that's with your green and your red combined. You can use, there's so many varieties of cabbage. Best not to use the sugar loaf cabbage, but it's a bit too sweet. But the green cabbage, of course, is the traditional, and there's plenty of varieties that you can get that come into that green. The Savoy, that's more of a yellow cabbage. It's not so bright green, and it's a lot softer leaf, so it'll ferment a lot quicker, and it makes beautiful sauerkraut. Just you don't get as big as garden harvest, so you don't see as many of them around. So with that red sauerkraut, we're going to mix that in. So how we mix the red sauerkraut in, we can do it like what I spoke about, how when we massage, the kale, when you get your kale and you just massage your kale, you shred your kale and massage that with your oil. And that's like starting off a kale salad. So with the red, we're going to put it into a kale salad. So massage your kale with a bit of oil, add some cooked quinoa, then a good scoop of your red sauerkraut, and any little additions that you'd like to add in there. Like you can put I like a little bit of tomato, you can put some parsley, some mint, and on top of here I've got some lovely nut cheese. That's just because we're going to serve it tonight with the nut cheese, but not to store within there. With that other salad, with our classic salad, you can actually put a beautiful homemade mayonnaise on there, and you've got coleslaw. So that's a really, really lovely way to serve it. So there you've got it. Now, when you serve that up, if you have a taste and you think, that's a bit sour, still a bit sour for me, get an avocado. Get an avocado like that, and just get your avocado and just mince it through. And avocado will take it, it's just nice and creamy, but apart from that, it'll take out that tang. That sometimes it just might be a little bit too acidic for you. So an avocado is your friend with that one. So there we've made our sauerkraut. The fermenting fairies are now going to transform it for us. And they'll transform it so that it'll come to like that. You'll watch the colours change. This was a beautiful fruit one, and you can hardly see the little heart in there. I've got a cookie cutter that I've cut one of these little babies that I put in there, and I've diced it all through there. So that's like your red and your green cabbage. So you can see it goes a solid red colour. That's the beautiful thing of this transformation that those beautiful fermenting fairies do for us. You can actually watch it evolve, and then you're going to put it into the fridge and you're going to watch it evolve onto your tongue, because it just keeps on evolving while it's in there, and it will keep refrigerated for a long time. The simpler it is, the longer it keeps. So that's why when we do like our crocks, when we ferment in our crocks, we don't do all these fancy ones. We do that pretty simple. With a crock, as I said, you need to have a bigger garden harvest. For every 5 litres, you're thinking of 2 big cabbages. So So the 10-litre one, which I've got sitting in there, that's got 4 big cabbages in there. You need to put water around here, so it gives, and you put little weights on top inside there, so it works, so you can see what's happening with those glass bottles. We're doing the same as this. So that little moat there, that water doesn't go in there. So if you do have a crock, or you're thinking of getting a crock, if you've got a big garden harvest, I'll give you a good little hint, because that water, if you let that moat dry out, you will have problems. That's the only problem you'll have. Add a little dash, just like a little half a teaspoon of vegetable glycerine to the water. That won't can't run inside, but that stops the water from evaporating. So that's my little tip for my crocks. With sauerkraut, you can mix it into so many things. When you start to cook with it, you're going to kill the good bacteria. But if you go way back in tradition, you go all around the cultures, you'll find the Polish made those beautiful, they have them at New Year time, the beautiful little dumplings. The French make one as well. The French cook with sauerkraut at a very low temperature, but yes, it's still going to destroy the good bacteria, but it's beautiful. And they make all encased meats, and they use wine and sauerkraut, but they really drain it all out. So what you do if you're cooking with it, you're going to drink what you drain out, because that tonic is very powerful. So that's okay. I put it into an occasional chocolate cake. This chocolate cake is my grandma's recipe, and it has beetroot. It has beetroot in there, and of course chocolate and sauerkraut. It has no flour. It's just the most amazing recipe. I have it for you. All you have to do is just send me a DM with your email address, because it's way too big. The files are way too big to put up onto Facebook or anywhere like that. It'll have to be sent to you, and it's called Sexy Sauerkraut. It has my love in there, the same love that you find that I've got when I'm massaging that. There's plenty of love, and there's plenty of things in there I've borrowed from all the people that I've met over the years. You know, everybody will teach you something in life. You're always a student, and that's the beautiful part about sauerkraut and any fermented foods. You never stop learning, and people will always share things with you. So in my Sexy Sauerkraut book, I've got my chocolate cake. It's just so beautiful. With sauerkraut, when you put a scoop of it, you can use the brine, and it actually works very similar to like a sourdough starter. It's got all that bacteria in there, and it rises, it just rises. It's just beautiful. So it has its parts. The sauerkraut you can actually put into breads. You can actually make like a very quick, it's a lazy man sourdough, I know that, but it tastes pretty good. It's nice and sour, and you would think you're eating sourdough bread. So there's reasons that why we do cook with it. We're going to be eating our salads like this every day, so we're going to be getting plenty of the good bacteria into us. So it's okay to cook with it because it has its place. So thank you for joining me. I hope that I've got you inspired if you're not already onto the fermentation journey. If you already are, I hope that I taught you something there. Love and bacteria. Jerry?